say about the post-industrial society, post-industrial society being another myth that's been created in the imperialist powers, where you can actually produce very little productive wealth, but the majority of the population somehow can live off services? Is this not connected?
Is there a myth of the post-industrial society where you can produce very little, you can produce great wealth, but with little of the population productively employed? A great part of the population is productively employed. It's just employed in Papua New Guinea and high repression areas. The idea is to the effect of there has been, I mean, there's always been multinational corporations, you know, of course, but there's been a very rapid acceleration since the breakdown of the international economic system in the early 70s. Very rapid acceleration. There are other factors that contributed to it too. So, and that's what's indicated in some of the statistics that I mentioned. So you now have internally managed trade in a kind of corporate mercantilism, as it's sometimes called, where the labor is moved to high repression areas so that you don't have to worry about those pampered workers at home, as the Financial Times puts it. And in fact, this is a kind of, I don't know if post-industrial is the right term, but there is a shift of models. I mean, there was a kind of a Henry Ford style model where the idea was production was basically, the economy was more or less national, not totally, of course, but more or less national. And that meant you had to have consumers to keep profits up. So Ford innovated the idea of paying workers enough so that they could buy something, and that would enable manufacturers to make profits. Now, I think there's a shift away from that towards production by workers who don't have to buy anything, because they're mostly either in the third world or in the third world that's coming back at home in the United States and to a certain extent in Britain, where you can have high repression, unorganized workers who really are not, and they're never going to organize because you kill the organizers or something like that. And if they try, you just bring in others who will replace them because there's a huge overflow as you drive people off the land and so on. No, they're never going to be consumers. So who are going to be the consumers? Well, in the internationalized economy, there are rich sectors everywhere, fairly substantial rich sectors in the industrial societies, and smaller but not insubstantial rich sectors in the third world. So, you know, you go to a typical third world country, say Brazil, after this great, you know, success story for capitalism, and say 5% of the population or something like that live at approximately the level of, you know, Western European elites, maybe richer sometimes. And, you know, 80% live like, you know, Central Africa. Now, in a rich society like, say, the United States, the proportions will be different, of course, but the structure is becoming more or less the same. And the idea is that the poor people everywhere will be the wealth producers, and the rich people everywhere will be the consumers, and the domestic societies, the domestic countries will be essentially police forces controlling their own populations, while the major decisions about the world economy and world society are made by the international corporations and financial institutions and the de facto world government, which is growing in a quite natural way to reflect their interests. That's the new imperial age of the Financial Times. The decisions are raised to the level of supranational institutions where parliaments can't influence them and citizens don't know about them. The problem with parliaments is that although they're more or less controlled by the same interests, they are to a limited extent subject to the influence of the rabble. And you want to eliminate that as you destroy democracy totally, which in fact has always been the aim of elites. I mean, there are kind of dreamy fantasies going around about history with a capital H converging to a liberal democratic order. I mean, this isn't even fantasy.